Corporates are only contributing 26%. 9 years ago, corporates were contributing 34%. It is because this government has conferred a huge bounty on Bonanza on corporates.
But then it was Mr. Chidambaram again who reduced the corporate tax to 30% in 2005, although along with the surcharge, the actual rate was about 33%. Were they bonanza to corporates also? Were they bonanzas at that time? So if that is bonanza at that time, bonanza now, it is not. Former Finance Minister who opened the debate actually spoke about various specific issues and raised probably 5 + 1 or 6 issues in total. But where he speaks about where are you going to raise this 3.25 lakh crores, which is what is mentioned in the supplementary demand. And he also questioned, saying, are you going to borrow, or are you going to raise revenue, or what is it? Please let us know. Sir, in September itself, Government of India has made it very clear that we are not changing our borrowing schedule, which gets announced. And in September, we announced for the second half year. We have not changed our borrowing plans, which means we are very clear that we are going to see that the revenue that we are generating is sufficient to take care of this additional. Because, for instance, sir, during the first 7 months, April to October, of the current FY, gross tax receipts have registered a growth of about 18% over the previous year, actual for that period. This is substantially higher, sir, than the budget growth of 9.6 over RE of last year. So there's enough buoyancy, which gives me the confidence that we will be able to fund this supplementary that we have come up with the demands. And that is reiterated and reinforced by the fact that even in September, we have given no changes to the borrowing calendar and announced it as well. So also, the question was raised about reduction in the corporate tax. Are you giving bonanza to the large corporates? So I would want to just highlight a few facts. So in 1994, under Dr. Manmohan Singh, the corporate tax was cut to 40% from then prevailing 45%. Then in 1997, sir, the then Finance Minister, who Honorable Member is here now, Shri P Chidambaram ji, brought the corporate tax down to 35% from 40%, after also abolishing the surcharge. Then from 2000 onwards, surcharges were back, raising the total corporate tax again to about 36 to 38%, which continued for the next 5 years after that. But then it was Mr. Chidambaram again who reduced the corporate tax to 30% in 2005, although along with the surcharge, the actual rate was about 33%. Were they bonanza to corporates also? Were they bonanzas at that time? So if that is bonanza at that time, bonanza now, it is not. Because we think when you reduce the corporate tax, and especially post the 2014 situation that we've been monitoring, getting the banks to be healthier, getting the economy to come back after being in fragile 5 situation, the twin balance sheet problems where companies were laden with debt and so on. Cutting down the corporate tax was only following some of those measures, which is important for business to grow in India, manufacturing to grow in India. So I just want that to be upfront put before this August. So there was this concern that are private investments not happening? And he was absolutely right. The former finance minister was absolutely right in quoting me, saying, I have gone to the various fora in which I met with private investors, industry leaders, business leaders, saying they should really rev up on investments. Yes, as finance minister, when I have an opportunity to interact with them, it will certainly be something which I look forward to engaging with them and also nudging them to see if they can be even more coming forward towards investing more. So even as I do that, and I shall continue to do that, non-food bank credit, sir, has been expanding at double digits on a yearly basis since 8th April 2022 and has reached 17.9% on the week ending 2nd December 2022. So gross non-performing assets, I spoke about the twin balance sheet problem, which we took up very seriously. Prime Minister Modi gave the formula of the 4 R's through which you can recognize the problem of NPS in the bank and also reform the banks, recapitalize them, and so on. So as a result of which, the twin balance sheet problem has been addressed. Gross non-performing assets have come down to a 6-year low of 5.9% in March 2022. The corporate sector has been, and this is matter of fact, sir, the corporate sector has been deleveraging its balance sheet, as evident in the declining core debt of the private non-financial sector, which has decreased to 87.8% of the GDP in June 2022, from where 97.4% that it was in March 2016. And this is a data given by the Bank for International Settlements. So, and together with this approaching to clean up the twin balance sheet problem, government has also taken up several steps such as the national monetization of pipeline, the Gati Shakti, the PLI scheme, all of which are bringing back investors so that manufacturing sector can really gain some prominence. Honorable former finance minister also raised this question about doubling of the real GDP. He observed that from 1990-91, it took 12 years to double the GDP, that is 25 lakh crores to 50 lakh crores. And then it took only another 10 years to double to from 50 to 99 lakh crores. So pointing out that since this government is in the 9th year, will we double the GDP, going by the trend that every 10 years you see them doubling? So Indian economy certainly witnessed an average growth of 6.6 from 2014-15 to 19-20. But these 10 years will have to also be looked at, particularly the last 5 years will have to be looked at from the point of view of COVID as well, where 1 full year we had to get into negative terrain as a result of the way in which globally all economies were thrown hither thither, and the lockdown and so on. So despite that, I can only say that we are somewhere very close to doubling it. We still have 1.5 years to go for completing the 10 years, but that is something which I want to draw your attention to. So equally, it was pointed out by the Honorable former Finance Minister that major world economies are facing recession, and India's exports and growth will fall in the coming quarters. Is the government seized of the fact? Is a question which the Honorable Member raised. I would like to just highlight that global economies, many of them, large developed economies as well, are facing recession. Because I think the way in which they handled the COVID, as different from the way in which we have handled COVID in India. Because the tendency was we should give money in the hands of the people, go printing notes, and here I would like to quote former finance minister saying, borrow and spend, and even print money to reboot the economy, was a suggestion given by the Honorable former finance minister. As we close the calendar, sir, calendar year 2022, we should look at the negative effect of the implementation of such a suggestion by the other countries. And recession is happening there, perhaps. And thankfully, because of the targeted way in which Honorable Prime Minister decided to give relief during COVID and address the concerns as was given as inputs from the various stakeholders, a targeted approach has kept us on the safe course of helping revival but not getting into recession. So this is something which I want to highlight here. In fact, the latest World Bank report, sir, which had given an accurate analysis, it was a snapshot of a picture, which I did go into details when I addressed in the Lok Sabha. When the world was dealing with taper tantrum, the situation then has been compared with the situation now, and the latest World Bank report has given a clear, pointed analysis where it says macro fiscal fundamentals are better than they were during the taper tantrum episode in 2013, speaking about India, when India was classified under a fragile 5. So, if macroeconomic fundamentals are better now, post the COVID, and this is not my observation, this is coming from World Bank, and I'm not comparing it with how things were handled during the taper tantrum 2013. It is World Bank saying that we have in India kept our fiscal fundamentals better now than how it was kept at that time. And multiple times both the IMF and the World Bank have said in several occasions, India is the brightest spot in the global economy and is an island of hope for global growth. So I just want to highlight the fact that real GDP growth and doubling of it is certainly a good indicator for which any government should work. But the way in which we have handled during COVID has kept us away from recession, whereas those who followed certain common principles, which was heard as advice given here also, have gone into recession. So then, 4 engines of growth. Government expenditure, I'm grateful it was observed not just by former finance minister but by many other members as well, that government's public expenditure is going on and good numbers have been allocated in the budget and so on. So I just want to highlight on private investment on which many members voiced concern saying, is it happening, is it not? And specifically, former finance minister also raised concern about it. I want to highlight how private investment is happening. I mentioned about it a minute ago, but there are specific pointers that I want to highlight here. In April 2022, sir, the credit rating agency of India, ICRA, the ICRA, said that some of the key industries showing healthy capex include energy, which is power generation, predominantly renewable and storage, transmission, oil, gas, and also green hydrogen. Then digitalization, including data centers. Core industries, including cement and metals, automotive, mobility, pharmaceuticals, chemicals, textiles, all of them are seeing healthy capex happening. This is April 2022 by ICRA. Then second, sir, on 2nd June 2022, I'm taking the name of a particular largest cement maker not taking the name, but I'm mentioning it, has approved a new capital expenditure, big number, 12,886 crore. And that is purely to increase the capacity of cement production in this country. Third, sir, private sector capex announcements are up 35% year on year and 53% above pre-COVID levels. This is a report from one of the equity research companies. Financial year 23, India private sector capex is seen to be driven by chemicals and renewable energy. This is an observation by one of the institutes which looks at equities research. And finally, on 14th December 2022, the Mahindra Group has announced 10,000 crore of investments in EVs in Maharashtra. So, private sector capex is happening, and it is something which is got to be noticed because of the favorable policy. The PLI, for instance, is a policy which we are seeing absolute robust response from the industry. 14 sectors have been given PLI, and that is drawing a lot of investments to come into the country. And even the capital expenditure, which I announced in the budget, had a state component, which is giving the states a 50-year loan, which will ensure the geographical spread of capital expenditure. And given that the current bond market and the yields are going up, that is an expenditure which the government of India is bearing, the interest. But we've given it to the states so that that can happen in all the states across. And that will also help us have, that will bring in the virtuous cycle, because the government would spend on investment, infrastructure building. So private final consumption expenditure stood at 58.4% in quarter two, in 22-23, the highest among second quarters of all years since 2013-14. And similarly, exports have been buoyant and at 23.3% of GDP in quarter two of 22-23, which is again highest among second quarters of all years since 2015-16. So contact-intensive services, that sector has completely recovered the pre-pandemic gross value addition levels in quarter two itself, and now they're going further. So largely the concerns which the former finance minister has expressed are concerns on which I'm happy to respond, that actually positive growth is happening. And I would like to assure the House that we are keeping a good eye on inflation-like considerations, which are purely extraneous nowadays because of the fuel, fertilizer prices.